Hello everybody again. This is part 2 of my battle with lymphoma. And as I said in the last video that they talked about putting the tube down my throat, which means getting on a ventilator. And I was told, I think it was one of the nurses or someone there mentioned that a lot of people that ends up getting on a ventilator, that they end up not coming back from it. So talking about being scared, but they said, and at the time I had it in my medical records that no life-saving, no extra measures done to save my life. But when I got that close to having that much problems where I could lose my life, I thought differently. I told him, yes, do whatever it takes to keep me alive. And I told him to take that off the records totally. And so they before they sent me down to, while I was waiting for them to take me down to ICU, I prayed to the Lord that to somehow not to have a ventilator, to have the tube down my throat. And ended up getting down to ICU, and maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe a half an hour, the doctor came in and told me that right now you're stable, you're doing good, we're going to keep things as it is and see how it goes. And from that I said, that's the Lord working. I may have been in the ICU maybe around a week or so before it kind of straightened up enough where I could get back into regular room. And although I kind of liked the ICU for one thing, the TV they had set up was pretty much right above your bed, right around the end of the bed, where you could sit up, watch TV close by you, no problem there. Plus the remote control they had a headphone jack on it, which I used headphones for it because those machines I was on was loud, and it was harder to hear the TV because of those machines, so I always used headphones. But when I got back to the regular room, those remotes didn't have the jack, so I had to suffer with the regular volume. And of course the sound came out of the remote, but seemed like it wasn't really loud enough to really hear that good. But I dealt with it best way I can. But then with the high flow machine, it was starting to go down, starting to go lower on the percentage of oxygen that the machine was producing, from 90, 80, 75, 70s, 65. Got, and at the lowest it got at that time was 50. But then they also started weaning me off the one medication that I was getting under with uh, I lost my train of thought. But the infection I was getting, that, I mean, the injection type IV, that's what it is. I was getting IV fluid. They started weaning me off the one IV fluid that I was getting to take care of COVID. And it ended up being they started doing it a little bit early. It ain't the doctor's fault or anything. It just, some bodies are different. They go by their standard practice on a lot of stuff, and some people are just different to where they have to adjust. But anyways, so started going up. I remember hearing 60 and then 65, and before I knew it, it was back up to up high again. And they came in and they said they're going to put me on the bypass machine for all the time. Instead of the high flow during the day, they put me on a bypass because that gave more of a direct airflow to your nose and mouth. So, and with that, keep in mind you can't eat, you can't drink anything because you can't loosen the mask at all. It was a pretty much sealed mask you had on, and it had to be that way. And they also sent me back to ICU. And I think they said tube because the oxygen I was having trouble with oxygen, just like before. So, but one thing they had to do is put a feeding tube in me. They put it in my nose, it went down into my stomach, and that's how they fed me, with a big syringe type thing. I mean, this thing that they fed me with it was a good size. Very good, big size. I mean, it wasn't gigantic, but it was maybe this long and about maybe inch and a half round. With a plunger, they hook it up into the end of the tube. They push the thing down and fed me that way. And of course, you don't taste anything because it goes automatically to your stomach. It's almost liquid at that time. Not really liquid, it's like, well, you can understand. It's not really liquid, but it's not a solid. More of a cream type substance, I believe. Of course, I don't know. I never felt the stuff. A lot of it was always a greenish color. Didn't look too appetizing, but it had the vitamins and everything you needed to survive. But then I ended up being in the ICU maybe about a week again. And before I finally got back up into the regular room. And then the machine they ended up starting. Actually, before I got up to the other room, it came a time where they ended up taking me off the bypass, put me back on the high flow. And at the same time, they also took that feeding tube out. And that was the weirdest feeling. I mean, it didn't hurt at all. It was just felt weird. But anyways, it finally got up to the regular room, and they had got up to the regular room, and things went pretty good. Slowly the oxygen machine was getting lowered more and more, and at that time it was out of the danger zone, positively out of the danger zone, where then because of me being in the hospital that long and not really able to really walk or anything, the farthest I went was maybe to a chair and then to bed. I mean, it wasn't even going to a restroom at all. So they was worried about me falling and everything, so what they had me go to a special select hospital where they specialize at getting people ready to go back home. And they had occupational therapy, I think twice a week, and physical therapy twice a week, which wasn't really that bad being there because you wasn't walking that much and didn't have to do anything really. But of course, they did have me go for a walk down the hall one time to see how I do. I think it was like halfway down and then back the first time, and then the second time was a little bit farther. And which wasn't really that bad. Sure, it kind of tired me out, but that didn't matter because I didn't have nowhere else to go or anything else to do of any importance. But then it got time to where I was able to go back home. And so finally got back home after 2 months. And of course they still had an occupational therapist and physical therapist happening, I think at that time, like twice a week or once a week, come to the house. And that's a time that I hated, because when they got done, each one of them got done, it kind of wore me out to where I didn't feel like doing anything the next day. But they wanted me to do certain exercises every day, like twice a day. And I didn't. I should have, yes, but I didn't, because when they got done with me, it wore me out. But finally that got done with where I didn't have to worry about them coming over. Things was going pretty good at that time. And ended up being 2 years since I got my cells back that I noticed a lump on my back. Wasn't hurting or anything, but I could tell it was growing slowly. And talked to my primary doctor, and he said he don't think it's lymphoma, but because there's no lymph nodes back there. But he also said lymphoma does have a habit of doing weird things. But he said, show it to your cancer doctor, which I was seeing him like, I think once a month, or yeah, around once a month. Anyways, because I was getting the immunoglobulin treatment, which is IV, that it helps your immune system, which usually people that does a CAR T cell therapy, usually they have to do that. I have read like maybe 2-3 months, a lot, or a little bit longer, and then they get done with that. But with me, it was ended up that I was still getting it, and I'm still to this day every month I get that treatment. But anyways, day came for the treatment, and it wasn't hurting at the time, but it was going larger, and the cancer doctor said about getting it biopsied. And of course, I said yeah, and at that time it was, as I said, it was going larger and larger by the week. And I remember talking to my niece around that time. I mentioned, if it ends up being lymphoma, I don't know. I don't think I even want to fight anymore. I was pretty much almost ready to give up. But of course, the Lord had other plans. Because of it being in the back, and being the time frame it took to finally get results, pain actually started flaring up on it, because it started blistering and that, and my brother called it erupted. He called it, but it was just blistering and everything, and causing tons of pain to where I was banging on the desk because it hurt so much. Basically, the first night I noticed that it hurting. Seeing my brother work nights at that time, you know, and basically the first night it started really hurting, I ended up not getting really much sleep, and finally about maybe 5 o'clock in the morning, around that, I called my brother and mentioned that I gotta go to the emergency room. He asked, mind if I finish my shift because it's only an hour left? And I said, yeah, go ahead, finish your shift, but gotta go to see, because I can't handle the pain anymore. So he got home, picked me up, went to the emergency room, and they did some tests and everything, and they prescribed to me hydrocodone, which is a kind of a stronger painkiller. Because, of course, I tried ibuprofen Tylenol mix that I had at home, and that didn't even touch the pain. So he gave me one at the hospital, and then on the way home from that, we picked up the prescription, but the doctor said, take only when you need it, which in a way was kind of bad advice. He should have, or he should have said more about the length of time it takes for it to finally activate, but he didn't. So, but anyways, we got home, and my brother ended up laying down, going to sleep for the get ready for his when he has to go back to work that night. So, but when the hydrocodone is good for every 6 hours, you usually had to take it. So 6.5, 7 hours, it would start. The pain ended up coming back where it hurt so much, and of course I took one of the hydrocodone, and it seemed like it wasn't working, and we ended up going back to the emergency room. And of course, while I was sitting in the emergency room, the pain actually ended up stopping, which means the pills finally kicked in. But it was kind of coming and going, kind of. I mean, it was kind of some pain constantly, but there was periods that was like it hurt more than other times. So it was kind of, the doctor thought maybe it was like muscle spasms. So he prescribed the muscle relaxers. And finally got back home after all that. Got home early enough where my brother could go back to work that night. Of course, later than he usually left, but he was able to, he made it on time into work, but it's just, he usually left early, and then he kind of relaxed and rested in his car until his shift started. So, anyways, he ended up leaving for work. While we got home, he left for work, and by the time that evening came, I was starting to feel some pain again. And it was hurting. And so I ended up calling a 24-hour number that was like a nurse on call, and explained to them what happened that day. And she mentioned with pills like that, like the hydrocodone, it takes an hour for it to activate. And it's best to take those on a schedule. So once she said that, I set my phone to ring every 6 hours to remind me to take it. And plus knowing that it takes an hour, it was like, wasn't worried about it as much. Sure, it hurt, but I knew it was going to go away eventually. But I wish the doctor would have said about it taking an hour, because it would have made things a lot easier. But anyways, gradually came with a PET scan and got the results from that. Ended up being, as I feared, lymphoma. But because of the pain happening in my back, it kind of forced me to continue on with treatments and everything because I can't handle pain. You know, I hate dealing with pain. So, in a way, I believe it was God allowing, first of all, it show up on back in an area where there's no lymph nodes, and then having it cause so much pain that it forced me to keep going. So finally had, and they, of course, they always have like 3 plans to basically choose from. Where I think I was in the hospital so they can do chemotherapy on me, and plus they had me going through radiation treatment, and which did wonders for the area. But anyways, I picked out one treatment which was anyways, one treatment that was kind of similar to the CAR T cell therapy but with less risk, and it's a treatment you can continue doing. It wasn't like CAR T cell therapy where it's one and done. You could keep on doing it if need be. So, of course, I picked that, which had ended up having like a couple treatments of that, and the area and back actually got worse, even though I was getting that. And when I seen the doctor the next time, she explained that that treatment wasn't working, and then they admitted me into the hospital because of a lot of it was because of my back, how it was and everything. Plus, yeah. So they admitted me, did a chemotherapy that the first day in the hospital, uh, and then of course it was always getting blood tests drawn. Uh, in one of those tests, they found a blood infection, which it and with a blood infection, they had IV they can give me that would take care of infection, but it was like normal antibiotics. You have to keep doing it to eventually it goes away. But in this case, they did a blood culture on me, which gave them a lot more information on they needed to prescribe me as far as pill form, because if they couldn't find anything, I would have had to stay in the hospital to finish it up. But in this case, they eventually found what I needed. And so I was able to go back home, during that treatment, that one day in the hospital after the one procedure ended up not working on me. The first morning waking up in the hospital that time, I prayed to the Lord that the Lord would show me what to do, what treatment plan to take, because I was scared. And that day, of course, me checking Facebook out all the time, and I joined a few Garfield comic Garfield uh, groups. So I was always getting the Garfield comics and everything. But a few posts came up. One was, the first one I seen was, it said, a miracle is on its way. Second one had a Bible verse. And the third one was similar type of thing. Now, anybody that knows the Garfield comic strip, you know, it don't even hit in that area at all. So, and that told me it was the Lord trying to tell me that I'm going to be okay. So, I mean, after that, it was like I wasn't scared anymore. I was calm and everything. Nothing scared me after that because I knew I was going to be okay. I mean, it was such invigorated me. So, anyways, I finally was able to go back home and did the treatments and everything, and there was a time that I noticed a small lump. My brother mentioned it was like a pimple on my back where the one wound was. And so they did a biopsy of it, and just before that I had a PET scan done, and PET scan showed that couldn't find any evidence of cancer at all. And then a biopsy, which was, I think was the next day, came up back where he didn't find any cancer in it, but all it was it had an infection, that type of infection that's hard to get rid of. So I was taking certain antibiotics for quite a while. So, which I just got done maybe a week ago or so. So, but basically right now I'm in remission. Hopefully to stay that way, but the doctors did tell me when I was going through the last cancer treatment that the best they can hope for is to put me in remission temporarily. But they said it will probably come back. So, I mean, if it does ever come back again, I'll do like I always done. I'll fight it. I'll do what I can to stay alive. But now things is going pretty good. And so I'm going to end the video right here. But before I do, there's one thing I'm going to do on every video is that if you have any suggestions at all that I can use to make this channel better, or if you have any prayer requests at all, put it in the comments below, and I'll personally pray for that prayer request or prayer requests. So I'm going to leave it at this. So until the next video, adios, and God bless you all.